Right, right, right. So how, let's say you have an employee who has a problem with their boss.
Yeah.
When would you go to the conflict resolution path? And when would you say, like, you know what, to be honest, your best bet is to resign and find someone else? So
Yeah. So that's interesting because okay, so I will get hired to help someone work through a conflict, and they're going to hire me when the stakes are high. So like you're a startup and you're having issues with your founder or your investor, usually the stakes are high. So I will coach someone to, with the words, with the language, we script it, we rehearse it, we work it out, and then we unpack it at the end. I can see that this isn't going to work. And I have learned that I don't say that anymore. I don't say, oh, it's not going to work. They need to come to that conclusion on their own. So I can lead them to the path. I can give them the material. I can give them best case scenarios or whatever we can practice. And often what happens is they do all these strategies. They have the conversation. Things get better. And they think, oh, this is great. And then 6 months down the road, it ends.
Right.
So, but they come to their own conclusion.
Right. Okay. But what are the what are the signs that tell you that this is a lost cause?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's the investment. So there's an energy investment. So sometimes someone is so bent on their point of view, their idea, there's no wiggle room, right? So for example, if I'm working with a nonprofit board, and I mean, nonprofit boards are interesting because they're often paid very little or not at all. So there's other things that they're invested in. And sometimes there's somebody on the board who is heavily invested in sabotage and is unwilling, like there's just no place to unwiggle, or it's just going to take too much time. That's a problem.
Heavily invested in sabotage, you mean it's in
the organization or they're personally invested in that sabotage. So it's that control of making things not work.
Because it's in their advantage.
In their point, in their mindset, right? So they in their family, they were the saboteur, and that's what they're used to, gaining control and power. And they bring that story into that nonprofit, and they're unwilling, there's no wiggle room to change that story.
Right.
So that's part of it, the lack of willingness. I'm stuck in this position. My only way of finding a solution is for everybody else to get unstuck from their position.
Okay, let's talk about me. Let's talk about my damage. I'll give you an example of a conflict resolution or conflict resolution technique that I used, and tell me if you've heard something like this before, or what your thoughts about it. So I had like a friend who we had some problems, then we ended up like cutting off the relationship, and I kept ruminating about her and the relationship. So after I don't know how many months, I ended up writing 22 pages Microsoft Word, 22 pages of like my feelings and analysis of the situation and the reasons why we caught on blah blah blah, and it was very analytical at the same, like emotional and analytical at the same time, and there was like videos in it and references and
wow.
Yeah. So my first question is: have when I talk to people about this, their initial response is like, "I've never heard of something like this." So have you heard of something like this? And where do you think, speculate in terms of like, where do you think this is coming from?
Well, I'm going to need more information, but I'm going to give you some guesses.
Right. Yeah.
So, yes, I hear of people who write things down. I haven't heard about the videos. I think that's interesting. But so my guess is that that's, like you use the word analytical, it's cerebral, it's cognitive. And what I would be curious about is looking at that document, where are the feelings?
Right.
And where is it uncovering that expression, those felt experiences? Because those would be the clues of what is happening underneath. The fact that it's 22 pages tells me there is a ton of connection, right? The opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy.
Right.
Not caring. So this is someone that you have invested a great deal with, and you care a lot about. Like if that was a client, that would be an incredibly great sign for me, right? In saying that there's something there. But the most valuable piece is that conflict alchemy space. It's, what is this saying about me, right? Where is my edge? This 22-page story that I have written is pointing to those edges, those wounds that are longing to break out into a bigger box. And so that's what would be the work, is finding those painful spots, those edges that are there in the felt experience.
Right.
And then inviting those edges to come forward. Because as soon as that happens, as soon as you make that shift, your relationship with that person changes.
Right.
Because you are no longer asking that person to be in your container anymore. Your container's just exploded. And sometimes that will scare that person, and sometimes that will expand. I'm so curious. I wanted to ask it first, but what drove you to start this podcast in its form, in the form that you have?
Okay, sure. Okay. I'm adjusting my seat because already I wrote about this, so I have a lot of material to say. But yeah, so basically it grew out of my natural way of interacting with people. So I became known as the guy who asks random weird questions in my social circles and my work and whatever. Which is interesting because growing up, I was shy, and yeah, I was shy, and throughout my life, I had kind of very different perceptions of people looking at me. So some people would find me as extremely introverted or very introverted, and other people I would find me as extroverted, very extroverted. So the way I kind of analyzed it later on is that the way I didn't engage in a lot of like this small talk, not because I don't like talking or communicating with people, is that I found it very surface level, and I found it very kind of ritualistic. We're just going through the motions. So I just didn't like this attitude, this kind of paying lip service to the actual conversation. So that's why I didn't kind of like engage in a lot of talking with people. But then I started thinking of thinking to myself, why don't I just ask the questions that are already here in my head and I'm curious about, instead of like, hey, how are you doing? How's the weather? Blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I started just like asking people whatever is on my mind. And yeah, I'm someone who's by nature, I have like lots of bubbling questions in my mind. So I just started to empty those thoughts, and I got positive feedback from people. So like, okay, let's turn this into podcast. Let's connect for my because the relationship building is a big part of my work. So let's turn this into a podcast. People who interest me in some way or another, like instead of like, hey, how can we collaborate with each other? Let's have a talk and see how it goes. Yeah, so that's how it came about.
And what is one nugget that you have learned? And I know this is early on, right? Because it's your how many podcasts have you put together so far?
It's about 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, because I could only find what you had on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'll send you the link for the YouTube. And
okay.
The LinkedIn was just one post of batch, but about 14.
Yeah.
I'll send you the.
That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, that's me. You want to ask something else? It's usually one question, but sure, go ask one.
Well, yeah, I'm just mindful of my time.
Yeah,
so
sure,
I have to head, but I've really enjoyed just your thoughtfulness. You've got I just appreciate how, my sense is it's like life is important to you.
Right. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully we can keep in touch.
Yes, thank you.